let's see if we could turn trash into profit.
Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna be doing is cutting all these down into some simple blanks. Great, so now that we have everything cut down into blanks, we're gonna go ahead and just check all the pieces and make sure to look for any imperfections. Just make sure when you are checking these blanks, if there are any imperfections, just make a little mark on it just so when you do start to cut it down, you can make sure to take those into account. Okay, so now that everything's been inspected, let's cut them down to size. The size that I'm aiming for is 1 1/4 inch wide and 3/4 inch tall. The ideal length that I found was 11 inches. I used a plywood scrap and a clamp just to make a very simple setup block. So we're gonna start with routing the slots. Now, before you blast me in the comments, I know, I do need a router table. For this, I used a 5/8 round nose plunge bit. I also made some marks on my fence, one on each end, so that I could quickly transfer the marks over to the piece. For the edges, I'm gonna be using a 1/8 inch round over bit. To start, I'm gonna set the bit just below that little shelf thingy. Now use this setting on the tops and the sides. That gives it a nice rounded finish. Okay, so now moving on to the bottom. I adjusted the router depth just slightly more so that that little shelf thing kind of shows. And what this is going to achieve is allowing me to have that rounded edge on the bottom as well, but also have some sort of flat base that's gonna raise it off the tabletop. All right, and now we're at the painful part, sanding. For the first sanding job, I just used 80 grit sandpaper to remove any deep imperfections, and then I would just do the whole piece with 120. So the next grit of sandpaper that I'm using is 150, and then I went over to 220, and yes, I did skip 180, and the reason I did was because I only had 1 disc left. Now you're probably wondering, where does the incense go? And I thought I was a genius for saving this till after sanding, because in my head, it would mean that there wouldn't be any sanding dust going into the hole, but just coming from me now, do it before sanding. And so what I did here was I kind of just did a quick rough mark on the center of the groove, and then I would use my drill with a 3/32 bit on a vertical angle just to make a little hole. At this point I would use an incense to kind of give me a rough idea of what the angle I wanted, and then I would take my drill and then copy that angle, and making sure that the actual drill bit was straight with the groove, I would go ahead and drill it in. Guys, we're almost there. We're at the final stage. Let's finish this thing. Now, after some research, I think tung oil is gonna be the best finish for these, and honestly, I've never used tung oil, and I will say, I love the results. I just love how much the colors popped in this and how dark it made the walnut. All right, guys, and that's it. Check out the final product. I'm actually really happy with how this turned out. So I did some research on Etsy, and I can see these selling for anywhere between $20 to $30. If I add up everything that I made, before considering my labor, I would be making $500 to $700 profit.